I'm Chris Penick, and I am here to talk about artificial intelligence, which, wow, what can we do in an hour? We're going to try to do our best to do quite a bit in an hour. There is a whole wide scope of things to talk about here and a whole wide scope of whatever your background might be. So I had to make a few assumptions on that, and I'm going to explain that in just a second here. But before we get too far into this, just a little bit about WebAge, just so you know. If you've probably been to a seminar before, if not, well, welcome. There's a lovely little hand icon for some of you to raise. There you go, and I see more people coming in now too. On that, when you raise a hand here, unfortunately right now, the only way with the GoToWebinar settings that we have is that pretty much if you want to interact, it's going to keep you in a listen only mode. But there is a question pool down there. There's a section within those controls where you can enter a question, and I'll keep an eye on that, but most likely I'll probably get to those near the end of some of this time. I'll try to open it up. It's a little bit harder to make it. I know some of you can't take that microphone off. I try. I'll see if I can turn them off and on individually, but we'll work with somebody. So if you have a question and I see some hands already there, put the question in there and we'll be good to go. I'm going to assume a few things that we'll talk about in just a moment, and that is, number one, that you may be just starting with AI. So that may not be the case. So we'll find out in just a second here. All right. I still see folks trickling in, and I imagine folks are probably going to be trickling in as we go. I'm about 2 minutes after the hour, give or take. So if we see some other people come on in, no worries. All right. Just a quick note that they'll miss some of the introductory stuff, no biggie. Just a quick note about WebAge. We've got all sorts of courses for all sorts of industry leading technologies here. I do quite a few. We work, I know it says serving large scale enterprise clients, but no job too small necessarily, no job too big. We've got quite a bit in there, so feel free to talk to myself or through the sign up link that you came in there, or you can always, there's a form right on the web page as itself if you've got, questions about other classes, other things to do. I mean, obviously, we'd love to see you in a class as you come around. But for today, there's nothing due from anybody. I don't need any, personal information. I don't need your phone number or your any of that, but feel free to get in contact with us. I'll give you a way to get in contact with me too, because after this, like I said, the way the GoToWebinar is set up, it makes the one-to-one interaction a little bit more difficult, but the talking seems to work just fine. But as far as us having a full-on conversation, it gets a little bit more difficult. All right, so a couple things there. All right, if you want to find out more about the webinars, like I said, go to our page, just /webinars. If you want to see the previous ones, so we've done Terraform, we've done Kubernetes, we've done, that's just me. I know we've done some others on machine learning. We've done quite a few other webinars on there. They're recorded for you. We leave them up there. There'll be the recording for this one after the fact as well. So you can go back in there and check on that one. That recording, as far as I know, it stays there for quite some time. I've seen recordings that go back quite a ways. But as I said, most likely you're going to have questions about things we talk about here. And sure, feel free to get in touch with me. I'll give you a way to get in touch with me as we go through here. Okay. All right. So we got an hour. All right. So I want to stress some words here. Okay. Some of those words that I want to stress are foundation, or for foundational. All right. Building blocks, introduction. But we're also going to talk about just what's out there, what can you use, how can you get to that point here. So I'm going to approach it from 3 sort of different directions here. All right, assuming, kind of putting you into some categories already. I'm already classifying students as we come in here. All right, so number 1, okay, some of you are going to be or are developers. All right, if you are a developer, you know who you are. Now, even that has 2 other categories we're going to break down real quick here. All right, but some of you are going to be drivers. All right, that's just my term for, you're going to use those AI products, whatever they are, those AI machine learning products, whatever they are. You probably, maybe you played with ChatGPT, Maybe you've gone and tried some of these make your own presentation tools or something like that that are all in online these days. Great. Or you've got a Amazon Echo at home. Well, then you've been using an AI tool. We're going to talk about that, what the heck AI is. And the last one, I guess we'll call them managers. In other words, your job is the business side of it. You got to figure out what products you're even interested in if you're going that way. All right. And even if it's something worthwhile for you to pursue for these other folks, the developers and the drivers, you might call drivers operators instead. But even developers, I'll break that down into two. Are you actually building an AI product? That's one whole field of study. That's another thing. All right. Versus I guess the better term would be you're incorporating AI into your product. In other words, it's an add-on. It's something added into it. You make I don't know, you're an insurance company and you make a little chatbot that helps you figure out the best policy for you. All right, sure. Okay, you're not building an AI product per se. You're taking something that's already out there, or if, for example, if you're using OpenAI's API and integrating GPT, bunch of acronyms, we'll get to that, into your application, that's a whole different process. And actually, that's probably the easier road too. So there's a lot of black box and magic on this side. All right, black box and magic, math magic. There you go. So that side I will touch on, but I won't go super deep in here unless, and again, it's kind of hard to be really interactive, but unless you want to explore linear algebra and calculus, then we probably won't touch this too deep. How's that? Okay. But that's our goal. So we'll kind of break it down into those 4 sections. They're not evenly distributed about that, but that's what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to talk a little bit about. Okay. All right. So next item for bids there is, just so you know, we do have AI courses of varying degrees on there, from just how to use ChatGPT, a prompt engineering, which is really getting more out of something like ChatGPT, but typically we'll talk about something called the OpenAI API, and then more about deep learning. There are also machine learning courses, which is really the basis for a lot of these things, and some data science courses that I would definitely take a look at. So again, depending on where you are in this whole timeline of events, might be someplace to look. All right, let me know. There we go. So contact information there. I'll bring this back up again at the end so you can grab this. I'm also going to give you something here. I don't have a slide for this per se. I guess I could probably put it in the chat or someplace there. But I will be brave here and let you get hold of me directly. Okay, and it's chris.penick. All right, so you may want to scribble this down, but I'll put it in the chat in a minute too, at webagesolutions.com. Same thing. Okay, so you can get hold of me directly after this, because no matter what, in this hour, we're not going to have enough time. It's just not going to happen. All right, there's plenty of questions you're going to have. Okay, so that's the game plan. There you go. All right, and done pretty much. There you go with slides. See, I'm not a big slide guy. I'm going to bring up lots of examples. I'm going to draw. I went to geek school, not art school, so I apologize ahead of time. I'll bring that contact slide back up again around, near the end there. But as I said, I'm going to walk through a couple things. So first of all, let me get a few things here. All right, so let's just talk about the building blocks. Let's start with that. So let me bring up my whiteboard here. We'll bring up my whiteboard and we'll go from there. All right. So I'm going to assume this much knowledge. Okay, let me get this over here. There's the whiteboard. All right, this much knowledge. All right, there you go. You can tell I use this whiteboard quite a bit. Okay. All right, and the first thing that we have to deal with, all right, is just the idea of intelligence. If we're talking about AI, okay, so let me narrow a few things down real quick. All right, you've got tons of definitions of intelligence. So I'm going to break this down into classical okay, versus, I guess we could call it modern today. All right, we'll get to that in a second here. All right, but if you think about it, you can be linguistically intelligent, you can be artistically intelligent, you can be numerically intelligent, you can have, great spatial intelligence. I mean, some of us are good with directions, some of us not. You can have, good physical. There's reflective, you're philosophical. All right. So all of that talk, from everything we talk in there, I'm going to put this more into the realm of computing. All right. In other words, there's a process for us to think about something. There's a process for us to get to an answer. Computers typically take symbolic input. They take a symbol, something that represents, to you, you have the letter A. The letter A, all right, to the computer is a number behind the scenes. It's a collection of zeros and ones. Doesn't matter what they are. Doesn't matter right now. That 0 and 1, because all the computer understands is numbers, right? But it takes that, the computer takes that symbol, does some sort of process. This is the classic von Neumann machine. If you ask the Harvard professors there, how a computer works, there you go, and spits back out some sort of symbolic representation again. Okay, so they take that symbolic input, they process it, usually numerically, they send back some sort of symbolic output, right? All right, so to do that process, we call it a process. I'm going to give you a different word, all right, because it comes up in machine learning and artificial intelligence all the time. And that word that I'm going to give you here is an algorithm. And you've probably heard that. I bet you I got some computer science geeks on the line, or computer science degree folks. I got some data science people. I may have some people who are, like I said, some of you may be the drivers, some of you may be the developers, some of you may be the managers, somewhere in between there. Okay. And at each stage there, if you've ever followed a recipe, you followed an algorithm, right? It's a series of steps for the process, right? To process that input to give a desired output. All right. So input, go through the process, give me some output. Okay. So those of you, let's see, I bet you many of you have already played with ChatGPT. And if you have, you've noticed that you could type, geez, dang near almost anything. So there's your input. Okay. The magic, the question is, what sort of process is going on behind the scenes, right? All right, so we're going to break that down into some little pieces as it goes through here. But in algorithm to computer science geeks and mathematicians, we like to give another name to this. We'll also kind of say, we describe a good algorithm is what we call an effective method. Don't worry, I'm going to have some other resources beside my scribbles, okay? All right, I just start with scribbles first. So an effective method means it's got a finite number of steps. It stops eventually. There are only so many steps it can go. ChatGPT can only look at so many words. I'll use the word words right now. And some of you may have heard the word token. We'll talk about what a token is. And ChatGPT is not the only sort of artificial intelligence, it's the one just getting the most in the news right now, okay? But that finite number of steps give us a definite, so finite steps, all right, give us a definite answer. And that's where, see, again, we're only talking classical right now. So in the classical world, there was that finite number of steps give us definite answers. So some of you might have taken like a data science course and play with Python, like NumPy, SciPy, Pandas, something like that. If I ask you, or a statistics course, if I ask you to take an average of numbers, there's a process to take the average, right? You go through that process, you add up the numbers, you divide by the number of numbers, right? And then you say, okay, here's your answer. That's it. So it's an effective algorithm, right? You do the summing, right? And then you add it up and then you divide and you get an answer. And you have a definite answer, right? The average is the average, okay? Well, that's with classical sort of algorithms here. Now with machine learning, with artificial intelligence, we have this sort of ability to add some risk or some confidence to an answer. And we'll get to that idea here. But if you've ever done any sort of basic arithmetic, you've used an algorithm. Okay, so there's my ugly scribbles for a second here. All right, but so our first building block for AI, because we said we're going to talk about building blocks. So building block number one, algorithms. All right, building block number two is a fairly obvious one. All right, that we kind of skipped over, and that's data. Number one, algorithms. Number two, data. Okay, so what are in there? So if you're trying to build AI, then you have to have some sort of definition for intelligence, right? You have to, and if you want to use humans to compare it to, then you have to decide what it is to be intelligent as a human. So when people talk about like, oh, it's uncanny, you know, it's like it's thinking, and you know, and I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to burst your bubble. Chat GPT is doing no thinking, not at all. It's not in the way we think that humans think. How's that? At least, trouble is we don't really know exactly how humans think either. But the point is that it is giving you what you want to hear, which leads us to one of our big ethical concerns here. Modern large language models, we'll talk about what that is in a second, like ChatGPT, they hallucinate. They make stuff up. All right, they can do this. And some of you may have seen, and I have it in here too, like just a reference here. Too many links open here. Too many links. I don't need that viewing for me, do I? You can still see me, but all right, there we go. Did you hear? So the lawyer who was trying to get case information from ChatGPT and didn't realize, I like this, he did not realize that these, there we go. I'll open this for you. I guess it helps if I have something open. There we go. We'll close the other tab. That's all right. Here we go. Just a side note. There we go. Short and sweet. Faces sanctions. He used ChatGPT to write a brief riddled with fake citations. Said, I was unaware of the possibility that ChatGPT's content could be false. All right. Okay, we'll talk about where it gets its content and all that in just a second here. But yeah, absolutely, it could be false. Absolutely. So in other words, if you're thinking of using ChatGPT or something like that from OpenAI to build your business and to use it in your business, think about this. If you're that insurance company again, you're that insurance company and you say it needs to give a recommendation for some sort of, it's going to have a conversation with a potential customer and give a recommendation for a policy. You better put some tight controls in there that it actually recommends a policy you have, because it's fairly easy for it to come up with just, oh, here's a policy. That's the interesting thing with math, with video, and so on with this. Okay, so we'll continue with this here, but I want you to keep that in mind. See, so you know, we said we talk about ethical concerns with all this as we go as well. All right, so which gets us to the idea of breaking this AI down here. You know, we've got essentially two kinds. Let me go. We'll just do another one here. Don't worry, I've got other things for you. You don't have to suffer through my bad sketches all the time. But if we take artificial intelligence, we're going to break it into two categories just for discussion here. And what we're really talking about is this first category, what we call weak. All right, it can do specific limited task. All right, it's so very specific. ChatGPT has limitations, even though you look at it, it's amazing what it can do. And the fact now that the most recent version, you know, allows for image input and allows for audio input, pretty impressive. But it still has some limitations, right? It's a specific task that it can do, right? Versus what we call strong, or the other term you may see in the news sometimes, somebody might use this acronym instead, you know, so artificial general intelligence. That's like what we imagine in the movies, right? Okay, so I'm not talking about that today, you know, and no matter how amazing ChatGPT or DALL-E or Bard or Bing with ChatGPT is, you know, it's not here yet. In other words, it can't match human intelligence in every way. It can't, you know, it's not an artificial general intelligence. Okay, so we'll leave that one out of the picture here. So part of the issue with algorithms, let's go back to this algorithm for this building block. So remember, first building block was data. All right, we're going to come back to that. Second building block was the algorithm. Okay, algorithm, I can spell. And when you build that algorithm there, right? So they're okay. GoToMeeting is in the way. I move you. There we go. So algorithms, you know, it's all in the algorithm. It's all in the list. There you go. So we can take, you know, an AI, and so you might have heard some terms. Let's throw out some buzzwords here, and I'm going to try to be nice here, okay? Is that we can take essentially, you might hear RNN, or the NN, neural network. We'll worry about the R or the A or the C in front of it. I'm not too concerned about that right now. We'll talk about different ideas here, but we'll stick with this A for right now. This artificial neural network. Yeah, it's supposed to mimic the brain. And so how do we find a better algorithm then? Well, we teach the algorithm to look at itself. Some of you may have taken an algorithms course in school if you're a computer science major, and you may have done something like where you've gone through and learned about dynamic programming. And this is kind of the same idea, is that we have essentially, yeah, we mimic a node to make a neural network. We mimic a neuron, all right? And the neurons get inputs. And this is a classic, very poorly drawn. Don't worry, I have better graphics for you someplace else, but very poorly drawn. Here's my input, right? Things come in, all right? This is the thing that does some sort of process to it, has some sort of figuring out what does that mean for its output, okay? Now, I can draw an ugly little diagram like this. I can also write something like this in code. I can give you this same sort of idea in code, in Python and R and C and Go and Golang and Java. And you know, there's lots of ways to write this same concept here, okay? And I can get the same sort of thing here where I'm saying, okay, take all this input and give me something out. You know, do something with these inputs. Sometimes some inputs are more important than others. We can add weights to these inputs. We can say, you know, 1, 2, 3. Again, not drawn to accurate mathematical standards here. All right, we can, some of those, we can add maybe certain, you know, we're going to introduce another new word here, all right? And that is, we can add certain bias to it. Now, that's not bias in the terms that you think like human bias or associated with prejudice. This is bias in that we favor or we disfavor certain inputs, all right? For right now, again, I can write out the nice math formulas if you want. I'm not concerned about that right now. This is 1 hour of, hey, let's just do a little dive into this here. Okay, so these algorithms, right now, this is a one-way flow, right? You start here, and it just goes that direction. Okay, which means now what you could do is you could put another neuron over there. So you could use that output as essentially the input to another neuron, hence the neural network, right? And you can start building these out, and it gets you to these classic pictures like you see of something like better graphics. Like this one. Let's open that. Like that, right? Where you've got these little circles. You've seen these diagrams before where they show. And we'll get to this idea. We'll talk about what the heck this means and how this put together in just a second here. All right, but this is only one of many kinds of models out there. So I'm going to come back to this here. But for right now, let's stick with just this idea. All right, so I've got a single neuron. I can add inputs to it. I'll give you an example. I'm going to make a little neuron that decides what kind of sandwich to give you. And we can give it things like, oh, well, I would, you know, ingredients for a sandwich. We can give it peanut butter. We can give it, well, you need bread, maybe. See, so maybe we put a heavy weight on bread. We like bread, all right? We like peanut butter, jelly, sure, so far so good. How about I give you some mud or maybe some moss? You ever had a moss sandwich? You know, maybe mold. I'm sticking with the M's for a second here. How about mold, all right? In other words, there can be more than just those little 3 here. And again, this highly simplifying the idea. You can already tell, you can look at this is that, well, some of those inputs I don't want, some of those inputs I do. So they have different weights, different biases for them, and I get a sandwich, all right? Well, that new sandwich, what do you want to find out? You want to find out, okay, how's that sandwich taste, all right? So there's something here. We could have another little network, or you could have humans. And ChatGPT, OpenAI, had a part like that. ChatGPT had a thing called Instruct GPT. And what Instruct GPT was basically where ChatGPT said, hey, try, well, OpenAI said, sorry, ChatGPT is the product, OpenAI is the company. OpenAI said, hey, help us teach our learning model, our large language model. And essentially, yeah, they were saying, well, this is, so if you had a mud sandwich, you'd go back and as a human, you would probably go, ooh, that's a blech sandwich, right? If you had a, a peanut butter and jelly, you'd go, yeah, that's good. That's, reminds me of when I was a kid. Excellent, great. Did you cut off the crust and did you cut it into triangles? Right, it's gotta be triangles. All right, see, so if that kind of idea, right, could be done with humans. What we want, the trouble is humans are great at that. Really, they're actually not too bad. And a lot of the things that you work with that you think are AI, including like some of the ways, what do you think you're doing when you are doing those CAPTCHAs? You are training an AI for visual recognition. When you are, when you correct, when your Amazon Echo at home asks you, hey, did I answer you from the right place? It's learning to triangulate if you've got more than one unit, or if it tells you, did I, respond? Was that a good response or not? You are teaching it, and it is collecting that. All right. So that's good. That's fine. It's kind of inefficient. All right. So this building block is we need some sort of reinforcement. We need some sort of correction, if you will. Grading, reinforcement is probably the term. We need to somehow say, oh yeah, that's good. You're doing good. That's the way. Do that. Do more of that. Do more of that. And so they say in our relationships, we should do this kind of thing, that we should communicate with our significant others and our family and friends and children, things we like, tell them. We often don't tell them. We often tell them things not to do. We often don't tell them things they should do. All right, so there's a lot in there, that algorithm. And so that's the basis when we start getting a little bit deeper into this. That's really the idea, is that, okay, so what if I teach instead of the humans to do that? What if I somehow build this network right here so that it can do that, so that it can respond back to itself in a way, or at least from node to node. That's that layer to layer. So we have some, you might hear this term back propagation. And again, I'm not worried about getting into the nitty gritty technical details on each of these things as much as the concept that you have these layers of these networks of artificial neurons, and those artificial neurons can forward their output to the next layer, but they can also turn around depending on the kind of neural network you're building or the kind of model that you're building, they can feed back. So they can send some sort of reinforcement, some sort of feedback back and say, that's a good weight, yes. Or adjust that weight. We like peanut butter, adjust the weight for mud till we get the weight for mud almost down to zero, because nobody wants a mud sandwich. Adjust the weight for jelly to, make that up, really raise that rate, that weight on there. All right, so that's the general idea of what we're getting to over time here. All right, so where does that leave us? We got more here, more to work with. Okay, so we've had other systems. Actually, whoops, I closed that up, didn't I? Did not mean to do that. Where'd you go? There you are. Back to my little scribble. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna drop this one out for a second, and instead, give me one moment here. Bring up the easier pen to work with. It may take a second. It likes to fight me. There we go. There it is. Okay, good. All right. Okay. All right. Nice. All right. And moving on. So you've got all kinds of other algorithms here. And again, I've only got so much time to put in there, but let's do this too. Let's hold on. Pardon me, I'm sorry. I'm grabbing, I had it open and something just closed up on me. There we go. I always seem to have, no matter how much I prepare, it always seems to, well, I guess I'm going back to this then. Never mind. Okay, guess I'm going back to the whiteboard because they're forcing me to do an update. There we go. No worries. My lovely scribbles. All right, so moving on. All right, here. So the thing is that what we want to add and where, so we've talked classical, right? Let's jump a little bit here because I've only got a little bit of time left here. And let's say goodbye to classical for a second. All right. And let's see. Where's my, there it is. That's what I was looking for. All right. And we'll talk modern. Okay. So a couple things we need to be concerned about in both. All right. And that is, we said building block one was data. All right. And there's lots of ways to get data. We've got qualitative data, all right, the classic, and quantitative. All right. So an example. All right. So qualitative, images, non-numeric. Think. All right. So that should raise a little red flag for you. All right, already, because we said computers. If you missed it here, I said very briefly. I said computers, right? What do? Computers do they think with numbers. It's all numbers. It's all bits, right, down to the bit. So how do we teach a computer what an image is, right? Audio, see, or things like, and we can even break this down into categories. We can have what we call nominal sort of thing. So for example, like nationality or gender, where you're putting, or Harry Potter house, for example, which are you a Hufflepuff or not? There you go. See, so it's just cannot be, it doesn't have an ordered hierarchy to it, right? For nominal, it just has a label attached to it, versus we could have something like ordinal, which just is what it sounds like, in that there's a layer to it. Like you in baseball, you can go from the Pee Wee leagues, the little league, to minor league, to major league, right? So you're going up, right? There's a hierarchy to it. Or pain severity, because pain, they show those little smiley faces to the frowny faces in the hospital. If you go to the emergency room and it's like, what's your severity of pain, and they assign a number, it's kind of fake, the number there, see, because it doesn't really have a discrete setup there. Quantitative is numbers, right? So we got discrete, okay. First, in other words, typically think anything that be counted with some sort of specific unit, like how many employees do you have, how many pizzas are in your order. I assume you don't let them order half a pizza. Or cars in the Indy race, right? The number of cars starting the race, number of cars ending the race. A partial car doesn't, begin or end. And then you've got continuous, okay? So continuous data, just what it sounds like. It can have some sort of fractional part to it, right? Height, weight, values are often in a range, okay? So, which leads us then to what we can call modern, or I'm going to give you a different phrase for this, because we're going to deal with numbers again. Statistical. Okay, so statistical artificial intelligence, statistical AI. All right, what we want, okay, is essentially some sort of, we want the ability to infer, to guess, to weight, right? Sound familiar? Here, as opposed to we want hard, fast numbers on this. So we're going to add, right, the ability that it's continuous across there. Let me get rid of this. Hold on. It is fighting me. There you go. I don't need you at all. We'll just let it go. All right. So let's boil this down then. So let's go play with. Yeah, let's open up chat. Okay. So let's just use it as an example, all right? Yeah, I know, I gotta log in. Okay, we'll log in. Sorry for the wait. And there we go. And here we are. Check your preferred one-time. Oh yes, I got this on now. So you could, by the way, there's a little side tip. You can add two-factor to your setup here, so that there you go. Memorize my two-factor number as we go, so that you all didn't. Let's see. There you go, my one-time code. There we go. Okay. And so I'm going to show you a few things here, just a couple examples. One is, let's just try a new one. Okay. So complete the sentence. All right. So I am from, whoops, Spain. My native language is. All right. Now, why would it say Spanish? What's in there, right? Well, there's a couple things, all right? The model is, there's a couple things that ChatGPT has to do. One of these things, all right? And the first thing, and I just got rid of that pen and now I need it back. All right, just a second, there we go. All right, one of the first things is it's gonna take what I said. GoToWebinar never likes my tools. There it is. Okay, it's gonna take what I said. All right, this is for 3.5, but it doesn't matter. We can switch it to 4 real quick here. All right, and each of these things gets broken down to in something called a token. Now, a token, you can think word, but it's not really a word. Or sometimes you can think of, I'll give you an example. If I had said, if I put the word don't in here, in English, that looks like one word, right? It's contraction. The funny thing is, so ChatGPT would probably break that into do, and then the other token would be the nt. So because it's different meaning. So it's tying meaning to these things, these pieces of words, and it will even break the words like language down and so on, and we can go into all that. All right, so all of this here, you logically look at this, your brain, you go, okay, if you're from Spain, then your native language must be Spanish because that's where you were born, but it's put 2 and 2 in together. Here's the thing. ChatGPT has no knowledge of this. It's nowhere in its, there's no database that says, oh, this is, Spain, and the native language of Spain is Spanish. What it has seen is in its vast corpora of text, and we're talking terabytes and terabytes of text. And I can bring up slides showing you like where it's got. Think, believe it or not, most of it's from the web. So from Reddit, from Google, from you can a few little subdomains here and there. It's funny, actually the original one, the original pile of data, a lot of it came from Reddit, unfortunately or fortunately. So this training data, and what ChatGPT had to do was take those volumes of text and break them into tokens and say, here's what happens. All right, so I am hungry. Let's try this. How would you finish? I need a, what'd you put in? Some of you might put, I need a sandwich. Some of you might put in, I need a pizza. All right, so what ChatGPT has is really just a large, in what it sees, pizza, and it says, okay, maybe that's a, or a, donut, 0.3, maybe a sandwich, because donuts would come 0.1. All right, and one of the things that when you start working with the API, instead of just using the chat tool, all right, is that you can write a program to ask some of these things, and you can say, okay, fill in, complete this, do a summary of this product review, or take this PDF and summarize it for me. And all ChatGPT is doing is telling you, here's the most common word that follows this phrase. And it has a window to look back. And that window, so the next thing is, all right, so we're talking about data, and we're talking about tokens. Now we're talking about how far back. You can see I've actually asked it to describe itself too. It's kind of interesting that it will describe itself. We'll bring some up here. So how far back it can go and how many tokens it looks to. So what we're talking about is a general class of algorithms called large language models. And many of them have memories. And there are different ways to do this. You might hear phrases, and again, I'm trying to avoid the acronym soup. It's this catch-22, but you have what we call long short-term memory. It's basically a window. How far back is that window? And if you think about it, you ever had a conversation with your spouse where they remember something distinctly that you said, you don't remember it, and because it influences what they say, and so you suddenly get this confusion here that they have a long short-term memory. They're remembering this conversation and they're going way back. And versus I remember what I said 30 seconds ago. That's about it. All right. So that time in there is all part of the algorithm as well to build that in there. All right. So now okay, so what does that mean for us? All right. Because remember, one of the things that we were going to talk about. So one of the things that we were talking about with this is how can you make use of this in your business? How can you apply this to your world? And I can go into deeper depth. We could go really deep into how this whole thing works with Chat GPT, but I know that I've only got a few minutes left, so to talk about some ideas here. All right. So first of all, a couple things. Let me give you my some more scribbles real quick, and then we'll go. And then I'll kind of open up. Maybe we can do some sort of. I'm trying to see if I got. There we go. I see some questions coming up, and I want to talk about that real quick. It doesn't show it to me. Why do you not show it to me? There we go. Sort of. Okay. It just doesn't seem to enable it all. All right. So first up, let's talk this. Ready? Okay. Yeah, wait, there we go. Sorry, hold on. I'm gonna jump quite a bit actually because I knew we'd run out of time. So just a quick side note on some other things here. So if you were, let's make a plan. If you're thinking about setting up some sort of product, for your company, all right, you still have quite possibly the ability to deal with classic artificial intelligence or machine learning. And you can, and there are all sorts of tools here and we can talk. So you come talk to me about, NumPy and SciPy and SymPy and decision trees, and classic rule-based sort of things, classifiers, okay, where we say, okay, and so I'm going to give you an example of how you can help me, or classifiers where we put things into categories, so to speak, right? Or regression, the classic regression. All right, here, if I gave you, here's a simple linear, right? I could say, okay, here is my pie shop. No, not yet. Here's my, I'm the ice cream truck, all right? And I've noticed that here's the temperature. Here's the, when I make a stop, the number of kids that run up to the ice cream shop. As the temperature seems to go up, it seems to match. So if it's 75 degrees today, but hey, tomorrow it's 85, so I'm thinking I'm going to get this many kids. All right, not a good relationship, probably not accurate. All right, but this many people showing up and selling that much ice cream. All right, so what's the goal? The goal is for prediction, but it's also for finding anomalies or finding something in the past. If we see something that's way off, all right, we can do that as well. So we can do that with what we call classic clustering too, where we put data points together. We say, okay, these data points go together and these data points go together over here. And these are some other data points, right? We gather them together. And again, some sort of anomaly. What is this guy doing out over here? All right. All that's classic. That's machine learning. So if you want something like that, you come and talk to me about some machine learning class. If you want to incorporate these giant models that have already been built, and so let's talk about like what was put into some of these things here, all right, and what you can do. All right. So these are, well, semi-supervised models. We haven't talked about this idea of, well, one more little concept here, all right, that we've got learning where we can say, let's add, all right, training data, right? Let's give it some data. So we can say, let's go back to our building block. I can label data for it. If I label the data for it, get a bunch of humans to do it, all right, then I take that, all right, and I break it into essentially sort of 3 pieces here. I can say, all right, well, you've got, I can give it everything. I can say, all right, here are the inputs. Here are the outputs. And then I can say, and here's the rule to connect those together. So then I give it test data. See, so I have training where I've labeled and said, okay, take my data. I can give it test data. Same thing. Now, why does this matter to you? Because you're gonna, if OpenAI did that for you already, OpenAI used the internet for good or for bad. So let's talk about this for a second here. All right. One of the things is, we need to talk about some of the ethical implications of that, and that is OpenAI has not been specifically forthcoming about where did that data come from. So we need transparency. Okay. And so Biden just worked with a group right now. The U.S. has got a proposal for regulations on AI and data transparency and process transparency on it. So does Europe right now. And again, so we're getting to this point where we're going to see, whether or not, it's not, even the companies themselves are kind of for some of this, but OpenAI will not tell you exactly what that data set is. And the problem is that, so that's where the alignment comes into play. All right, let's go back to my little Spanish question here. So, all right, it didn't accomplish much to ask it about Spanish. But we're going to throw a word out here. All right, when you talk about AI and you talk about building an AI product, you have what the AI wants to do. And I have to use that word once in quotes because the AI doesn't really want anything. Here, it's just been told to give you the next most likely completion. And it's just this next. What's the next most likely word? And it can keep building that. It's the same thing when we look at image processing, the same sort of concept. If we take an image and I can say, so the AI, for example, that drives the Tesla has been told, okay, yeah, if you look at that image, if you see those shapes, that's a human. That means don't hit that. If you see these shapes, that's a stop sign. If you see these shapes, that's a car, all right? And it's been trained again and again and again that that's right or that's wrong, and it still makes mistakes, right? So it's the same thing with here, because let me show you how wonderfully we can confuse this, all right? So here is, I asked, and this is actually with a plugin, I asked ChatGPT to describe this image for me. All right, because we're going to get into our little ethical thing, and then we'll start talking about how to apply this. So how would you describe this image? You say, oh, it's a mountain goat, right? That's about it. I mean, mountain goat on some rocks. All right, so when I asked to do this, now, truthfully, it was using a plugin to do this because, and so we'll talk about plugins are essentially, yes, you can extend, they've opened essentially a program built to talk to ChatGPT, well, talk to OpenAI's model. How's that? So here you can see it says the image showcases a stunning mountain range serving as a backdrop to an array of wildlife. An array? What? I don't see. All right. It says at the center of the image, a majestic white mountain goat stands on a rocky platform. Got that right. Its thick fur contrasts with surrounding brown rocks, and its long, elegantly curved horns extend from its head, giving a defiant look as gaze off. And then suddenly it talks about a bald eagle, a grizzly bear, a dog paw. The background image depicts this. Now, why would it do that? Because it doesn't have any real concept of the image. What it has is, oh, if I see these pixels and I see this image, this looks like some other image I've been trained upon. And that other image might have had those features, may or may not, who knows? All right, or in other words, it's kind of answering what it thinks you want to hear. It's been rewarded in the past on this, okay? So as you start applying some of these, keep that in mind. All right, so let's circle around here. It's really, I'm trying to see if there's any, I want to kind of bring us back to a point here. We've talked a lot. There are other, I have graphics on many of these things. I have other resources. If you contact me, I will be glad to share some of this information. Of course, you can always get it from the, you always get it from a course with us, and I'd love to see you in one of those here. But here, let me kind of break down some things here. So that foundational algorithm, all right, these large language models, GPT is one, all right. there is, you know, Bert and so on. And I'm not so worried that if you understand the different flavors. Last time I counted, I went out looking, and about 130 plus different algorithms of this nature from various parties, from Google to Microsoft, you know, OpenAI to small little startups across the board. They share some similar characteristics, and that those building blocks that we're talking about are they are taking text, because computers don't understand text, and I spared you from one word. When we take that text and we break it into those tokens, we create for each of those tokens, each word makes a token, and each token we call a vector. And what that is it has a whole bunch of values. And currently ChatGPT uses 768 different parameters for that individual word, where it assigns a number. So think of it like this way: the word goat, which I just typed, would become a list of 0.7, 0.1, and what these are, each of these is a parameter, like how intense the word is, what its relationship is to other words, and that's all codified in essentially a vector of 768 numbers. So the word, you know, Billy, we know that, oh, it often comes close to goat because we know of its numerical relationship. We can plot this out like you did in math class on a chart and say, oh, this word appears here, this word is right here, but it's not in 2 dimensions, it's in many dimensions. You might hear the term feature. All right, so the thing is that, you know, beyond something I can even picture in my head, right? Of, you know, you give me a 3-dimensional, I can do 3-dimensional. Once you start getting into more than that, then it gets really difficult for me, but it's easy for the computer to say, oh, okay. So essentially, one of the things it also has is it knows probabilistically how likely that a certain word follows another. And that's the basis for the whole thing, for many of these models, that general idea. There's a classic algorithm called word to vec is the one you want to see, word to vec, and I can show you papers and all that fun stuff in knowing this. Now, let's talk about how to integrate this. All right. So the thing is, you have to decide if you want to be a developer. If you're going to be a developer, come learn how to write AI programs with me. Great, I can show you. If you're going to integrate it, probably the easiest thing right now is for everybody to do some sort of prompt engineering. And what that is let me show you an example here. Do I have this open? I don't. Look, some basic code here is that I can write Python code basically that teaches. I add more to it, and so you might hear this concept. I'm gonna add another concept. Ready? I'm going to give the example. You notice, like I can do what we call a few shot example for something like ChatGPT. I can say, here, let me show you, and I literally give it, it's like a dialogue when you learned a foreign language in school, and they said, you, them, us, you know, me, you, it was so you write out that little dialogue and to give an example to ChatGPT and use that as the input. And say, here's how I want you to respond. You can even show it formats of your data, how you want it to create, so it can create tabular data or JSON or CSV for you. And all that you would do in a prompt engineering course. So the ethical implications here, though, of course, you know, the use of the restriction here. So how do we do this safely? You're going to have to come up with a policy for your organization. You're going to have to make this part of it. It's best to have the organization actually have someone whose job it is to keep track of these trends and these laws and, you know, the implications of those, you know, because it's quite simple, you know, think about, you know, right now we've already got companies that are scanning resumes, and they've been doing this with classic sort of techniques before, and we've already seen cases where, depending on the name, the type of name in there, or the way someone had their job title, that it's dumping it into the trash can versus forwarding it on to somebody to, yay, you got the job. All right. So it's had implicit bias, because where that bias come from? That bias came from us as humans, from the original data that was gouged across the net. All right. Now I have a lot more on a lot of this stuff. I only had an hour. Actually do a whole course on kind of an AI for everyone that I'm working on right now, which will be, a couple days, and we'll have, hands-on and that kind of thing. So, it's of course you got an audience of, over 100 people in all different backgrounds and with all different questions. I'm love to stick around and chat with you a little bit here. I do have a cutoff, and I got a few minutes here that I can, if I didn't see any specific, there's one. There you go. But like I said, if you have specific questions, you can try to put them in the question there, but let me give to you, I think, can you see the chat? If I send something to you in the chat here, let's try this. If I give you, again, how to get hold of me, webagesolutions.com. You see that? Did that come out to you? There you go. That's one way. Of course, I would be remiss, and the salespeople would get after me if I didn't mention, yes, we've got our courses, and please feel free to, call us, email, contact us, send up a carrier pigeon, ask ChatGPT to send us a text message, and we can explore this more, because I prepared, like, you touched like 2% of what I prepared here, because as I said, I'm putting a much broader course together. And I hope at least you got some useful information out of today. So please, go back, come visit again, send me an email or two, let me know what's up, and I will be glad to respond to those. And hopefully I see you in a class sometime soon, because hands-on is the best way to do this. And so, like I said, for the record, how to make this work for your business. If you're not a Python or JavaScript or Java developer, there are many courses that wouldn't be a big problem. However, if you want to really learn how to build a product on top of OpenAI's API, then probably being comfortable with something like Python. So that might be your first step. If you're not comfortable with Python or JavaScript, get some programming language first, and then the next step, is to come and do the prompt engineering or something along those lines. All right. Oh, the hardware, I use a Wacom tablet that's actually very ancient. I don't know if you can see this. There you go. It's like, yeah, it's huge. I do have a smaller one but it's Wacom Bamboo. The pen software that I write on anything, so Microsoft Whiteboard I use for normally just scribbling, but for the pen that you see in the right hand corner, something called Epic Pen. Microsoft Whiteboard's free for the most part. Epic Pen costs a few bucks. What else? We had another, let me see if I can see some more of these. Does it go that way? Recording's available. Yep, no problem. There we go. Yes. And was that it? Did I miss any? Okay, I think I got everybody. All right. So hopefully I see you all around soon. And again, you've got contact information for me. You've got contact information for our staff, who will be glad to help you out and direct you. And I am always happy to meet with an organization if you're trying to figure out, okay, where do I go next? And the web-based staff will tell you this. This is kind of really 90% of my job, I think, of sitting in on these meetings with a client saying, oh, let me find out what you have. Okay, where do you want to be? All right, well, here's our courses that cover that. If we don't have a course that covers that specifically, we can tailor some courses or make one to your needs. So hopefully I'll see you all again soon.